It must be thousands of years old, right? Tashigi, who had studied a lot of information about famous swords, including the blades of Alabasta, said. She was aware of several famous swords that dated back millennia. Over 4,000 years, Ezekiel announced a staggering figure. For a moment the room fell silent, and even Nami was shocked. The world government is only 800 years old. The history of this palace spans 4,000 years. The palace in Alabasta indeed has a history of over 4,000 years, and it was also mentioned in the original work. All these treasures of 4,000 years of culture were sold by the former king when my father was on the throne to save the people. I didn't buy them for so-called pleasure. It means nothing to me. But I want to leave something for future generations. Even after 4,000 years, my descendants will be able to point to these treasures and say, "Look, this is a testament to Alabasta's 8,000-year history." Ezekiel's voice was low and echoed faintly in the palace. This effect seemed to allow everyone to envision the scene he was describing. No wonder he said that if he didn't buy them now, it might be too late, because he feared these Alabasta treasures would be taken to other places in the world. Nami suddenly realized. For others, it's just treasure. For Alabasta, Ezekiel smiled and gestured around the palace, its history. After a long time, Smoker and Tashigi, who were stunned, came to their senses. Was it true? In reality, there is a deeper meaning they didn't understand. It's not just about preserving history and proving Alabasta's past. Ezekiel also wants to build the Forbidden City of Alabasta. It's a tourism concept, right? It would be too embarrassing to hold palace tours without even having a treasury. Is that why you're using Kuro's power from the Ishi no Mi fruit? Smoker said. Kuro of 100 plans. Ezekiel smiled. Though he was a pirate in the past, according to my investigation, he hasn't killed anyone but attempted to assassinate the Syrup family, so I sentenced him to 50 years in prison, but labor can be exchanged for a reduced sentence. How much work can be exchanged for that term? Tashigi asked suspiciously. On that matter, better to check with Nami. Ezekiel paused and then slowly said. After all, I can't make a legal decision. Nami said. I remember telling him that as long as he works, he can reduce his sentence and eventually gain freedom. That's not a problem. He needs to work off 1 trillion berries. Work off 1 trillion berries. Tashigi reacted instantly. 1 trillion berries. Yes, 1 trillion berries. Nami flashed a dangerous smile and then pulled a contract signed by Kuro out of her backpack. A drop of cold sweat appeared on Smoker's forehead. Devil, that woman is definitely a devil. In the future, it's best to avoid crossing paths with her. And that king definitely did this on purpose. Even Fujitaro was silent and felt a bit of schadenfreude toward Kuro in his heart. Is 1 trillion berries a lot? In reality, having the power of the Ishi no Mi fruit is equivalent to having an invincible team of super builders. There's nothing impossible about earning 1 trillion berries. Therefore, although the figure Nami mentioned is astounding, it is something Kuro can achieve. Smoker Tashigi, I have 2 tasks for you, Ezekiel said with a smile. We're ready. They immediately focused. Smoker, I want you to travel to the New World and bring someone to me, Ezekiel said. Who? Smoker asked. Big news, Morgans, Ezekiel replied. All right, Smoker didn't hesitate. Morgans is not a wanted criminal or pirate. Although he often appears in various major pirate groups, he's really just quite famous. As for Tashigi, Ezekiel looked at Tashigi with a smile and said, I want you to go to Rain to meet someone named Miss All Sunday. Although Ezekiel wasn't sure if he could bring Nico Robin, he could invite her to come and talk to him herself. Although Ezekiel learned ancient languages, he still wants to recruit her. The talents and insight she possesses are far beyond those of ordinary people. If one considers Alabasta as a force similar to a pirate crew, then Ezekiel is the captain and his subordinates are Fujitaro Zephyr, Smoker Tashigi, Nami and Kaya, who is reading in the library. It seems there isn't a decent guy among Zephyr's students. But the opponents he was about to face did not hide their strength, it was out in the open. They are the 5 elders: Akainu Borsalino Yellow Monkey, Sengoku Garp, Crane Soru Mamasaji Green Bull. This gap between the enemy and Ezekiel's team truly calls into question the strength of the 4 emperors. Due to the urgency, Ezekiel even thought about Enel from Skippy. In fact, that's his next target. Although it's somewhat difficult, there's still a chance to muster high-level combat power. Shortly after Smoker and TashIG set sail, the total number of mobile phone users successfully exceeded 15 million. Perhaps thanks to the large amount of funds Ezekiel invested in building Alabasta, people had more money, and more importantly, thanks to the business route of home syrup, the number of external mobile phones is also increasing. Just at the moment when everything was on the rise, bad news came from the River of Life project. The River of Life pipeline at the Yuba section suffered enormous damage from unknown sand pirates. Although the leak is blocked, there are still losses. It took nearly 3 days of water shutdown for emergency repairs, and then a week for full repairs. This very much angered Ezekiel, and he immediately called the Marshal of the Royal Fleet, Zephyr, for a meeting. This time he wants to fully uncover Crocodile's schemes. Headquarters of the Royal Fleet of Alabasta in a room. One shouldn't be so dependent on a mobile phone. Honestly, if it weren't for Ezekiel's sudden call, Zephyr might have continued browsing the forum until morning. About this, Ezekiel can only say that this old man is already over 70, so he really needs to be careful and not stay up too late. Although Zephyr is already the Fleet Marshal of the Royal Fleet of Alabasta and has a special team helping him remove comments that shouldn't appear on the forum, Zephyr still takes great pleasure in personally cleaning up the forum and being an administrator. I just love how unbearable it is for you that I'm messing with your head. Hey, you can come to a room and mess with me if you want. I, Zephyr, am sitting in the Marshal's chair waiting for you. Unprecedented confidence rose in his heart. Now he, Zephyr, was the Fleet Marshal. Although he wasn't the Fleet Admiral of the Marine headquarters of the world government was being the Fleet Marshal of a kingdom with a population of 220 million any lesser. In this world, there is no concept of a maritime zone of a specific country. In fact, in every corner of the world, there are many naval patrols from the world government. However, there's no specific division of the sea into territories. In other words, it's a whole sea free and belonging to no one. Many people don't know this, but the Royal Fleet has another objective, which is the exploitation of ocean resources. Zephyr put on his coat, gave the order to gather, and headed to the Fleet headquarters campus. While the building was already completed, there were still some complex tasks that could only be completed with the help of fruit abilities. The workers needed to hurry up a bit. Completing such a grand building would take no less than a year, and the labor resources invested are extraordinarily large. However, ensuring a proper level of living and working conditions for 1,000 soldiers of the Royal Fleet is a priority. Zephyr stood on the elevated platform, arms crossed over his chest. Below him, more than 1,000 fleet soldiers were lined up in perfect formation, awaiting his speech. 99% of these soldiers joined the Alabasta fleet after being discharged from the Marines, and all of them were at least Marine lieutenants, higher-ranking officers, rather than ordinary soldiers. There are even a few vice admirals from the Marines. And this was already the biggest blow for Sengoku. Additionally, Zephyr's 3 favorites were Hiren, Shuzo, and Bins. Unlike Borsalino and others, these 3 are his disciples who have learned the true meaning from him, not just students of the Marine Academy. To them, the master is like a father for life. And to Zephyr, they are children. Zephyr could have never dreamed of having his own team of true, genuine justice, and suddenly he received it at the age of 70. His joy is impossible to hide. Soldiers, you will be the banner of true justice in this sea, shouted Zephyr. Alabasta. Alabasta. The soldiers' cry shook the entire fleet base. Hearing the cry, Zephyr got about what the king had told him: if you're dissatisfied with the world government, dissatisfied with the Marines, then pursue justice as you wish, and I'll support you in this, Zephyr. Now the whole world will see who represents true justice. Zephyr has work to do. The first task is to head to the inner cities of Alabasta to arrest Shishibukai Crocodile. The fleet fortress is ready for action. According to the addresses provided by Ezekiel, there is a total of 13 Baroque workspaces in Alabasta. Destroying all these bases would be more than enough for the Royal Army and Fleet. The Royal Palace of Alubarna. Alright, let's begin. Ezekiel hung up the phone after his conversation with Zephyr and started to ponder. Before dealing with Crocodile, Ezekiel made every effort to surpass his strength. Now, Alabasta has both Fujitara and the former Marine Admiral, Zephyr. Yet Crocodile still dares to threaten the river of life. This means someone must be backing him. Naturally, it's our old friends, the world government. Ezekiel wasn't surprised. He clearly understood that the world government was growing increasingly intolerant of Alabasta, especially after the incident with Zephyr. The idea of eliminating Alabasta was becoming more and more crucial. But, obviously, physically destroying Alabasta like O'Hara is impossible. It's the same reason why this country has endured for 4,000 years. It is simply too vast. O'Hara is just an island, but here, it's a continent. O'Hara had at most 180,000 people, or even fewer, whereas here there are 220 million people. So, there are no more than two better ways: first, destroy the royal family of Alabasta, and second, break Alabasta into pieces. The world government wants to have absolute power, and it realizes that Alabasta indeed possesses the power to threaten them. Such power is difficult to achieve with just one or two admirals, even though Ezekiel has two of them. In the world, there are three main ancient weapons, each having the capability of destroying the world. It so happens that the key to understanding Pluton is in Alabasta, and Ezekiel knew where to look for Poseidon. But there are two big problems. First, the exact location of Pluton is unknown. If it were that easy to find, Crocodile would have found it quickly. Even without Robin's help, it wouldn't have taken long. However, even in the original text there is no information indicating the exact location of Pluton. And Ezekiel wouldn't naively believe that the design for Pluton exists in Water 7. Isn't that funny? Ezekiel thinks that if such a design really exists, at the very least, it should be able to fill a football field on paper. So the only reliable option is Shirahoshi. Ezekiel believes that Shirahoshi's ability to control the Sea Kings might just be a skill, rather than a bloodline inheritance. If it were passed down by blood, there is no reason why the previous 10 and 8 generations of the Fishmen royal family did not exhibit this ability. And if it's a skill, it can be uploaded to a phone. If this is such a capability, it's clear that it would definitely weigh more than the memory required for a devil fruit. Ezekiel calculated that he would need to prepare between 300 and 500 gigabytes. It will be difficult to acquire. Currently, he has just under 300 gigabytes of memory. That's not enough. Updating the mobile phone has once again become the top priority. For this reason, he launched a special price reduction campaign to speed up external sales. To perform the update again requires 50 million users, but currently, the number barely approaches 20 million. However, thanks to the efforts of the Syrup family, half of the East Blue market has been opened and sales are almost set up. Ezekiel was confident that, as soon as official sales began there, the number would increase in an instant. After all, East Blue is one of the 4 seas. There are at least 30 or 40 out of more than 200 countries in East Blue. In terms of area and population, it's much larger than Alabasta. People in these countries also began conversing on the forum. Why haven't you gotten rid of Crocodile if he's a criminal? But Crocodile is a warlord recognized by the world government. Alabasta, do you have proof? Why do I feel like all of this is fake? As a country, we didn't have the right to speak without power. But now the royal fleet of Alabasta, along with the 6 armies of Alabasta, has started acting vigorously, sweeping through the cities of Alabasta to arrest all members of Baroque works. A golden light resembling a laser shot across the sky and vanished in an instant, making it hard to tell if it was sunlight or something else. This time Ezekiel didn't take a ship to go to sea. He pinpointed the location and flew at the speed of light using the power of his fruit. Of course, due to the strange and shifting magnetic fields of the Grand Line, even at light speed one can get lost. When Ezekiel got tired, he would freeze the sea like Okiji and glide over it, or he would control gravity to leisurely float in the air. For a man with such fruit powers as Ezekiel's, crossing the sea wasn't difficult. But this was not an overconfident venture out to sea. Ezekiel always remembered that the sea is terrifying. About a day later, he reached the Sabaody archipelago. 79 enormous Yarukaman mangroves grew tenaciously from the ocean floor. They extended through the sea's depths thousands of meters in a chase for the sun. The so-called Sabaody archipelago is not really a continental island. but 79 islands made up of the world's largest branching Yarukaman. Ezekiel searched for a long time and finally found the destination of his journey on the 13th island, Shaki's rip-off bar. Fortunately, he had detailed information, otherwise it would really be difficult to say whether you could find it on the vast Sabawati archipelago. As soon as Ezekiel opened the door to the old bar, he was hit with the smell of smoke mixed with alcohol, but it wasn't particularly crowded or noisy. At least in the anime, this place seemed like a reputable bar. "It seems we have a new guest," said a beautiful, mature woman in a black dress with a spider pattern. She held a cigarette and looked at Will, who entered the bar with a smile. Next to her was an old, gray-haired man playing on a mobile phone. He had a scar on his wrinkled face across his right eye, wore round glasses, and had a worn silver cloak draped over his body with slippers and light clothing. These two people are Shaki and Rayleigh. Rayleigh used to be Roger's right-hand man. He was capable of standing against Kazuru one-on-one. This shows that he is extremely powerful, at least admiral level. Rayleigh stared at Ezekiel, shifting his gaze from the news on his mobile phone. Aichi recognized the man, which surprised him. "Your Majesty, King of Alabasta." He stood up and said sternly, "What brings your Majesty here?" Shaki took a drag on her cigarette, but she wasn't all that surprised. After all, she had seen all kinds of people in this world. Even Rayleigh himself is a living legend. Though this king is a true king and perhaps the most special of all kings, otherwise Shaki and Rayleigh wouldn't be so polite. "Silver's Rayleigh, Miss Shaki." Ezekiel sat in front of the bar and was already examining Rayleigh's stats panel. Silver's Rayleigh 190 GB/ 310 GB. Armament Haki 80 GB. Observation Haki 60 GB. Swordsmanship 50 GB. Ezekiel decided to download the Haki first. The main reason was that Rayleigh's mastery of Haki was incredibly skillful. "Is there something you need, Your Majesty?" Rayleigh asked with a smile, not surprised that his interlocutor knew who he was. "I heard that you are currently working as a coding master. I want to buy a ship with resin coating. Can I count on your help?" Ezekiel hadn't arrived by ship, so of course, he would need to purchase one. "Are you heading to Fishman Island?" Rayleigh frowned. This king is special, one of those kings Rayleigh admired. Recently, so much has happened in Alabasta. Why did he leave everything and come here? Why is he taking such a huge risk to go to Fishman Island, which is submerged 10,000 meters underwater? No strong man would dare claim he could easily survive at the bottom of the sea. Behind this king stand 220 million people. Can he afford to risk his life this way? "I met a former member of the Sun Pirates in East Blue, a fishman named Hatchin Will said slowly. Unlike the other guys imprisoned in Impel Down, he is currently in Alabasta. I saved him, and for this reason, I want you to accompany me on the journey to Fishman Island." Shaki was in his grasp. She felt that the intelligence network of this young king was so extensive that it was unbelievable. How did he manage to uncover such secret things? Shaki and Rayleigh were husband and wife and had worked together for a long time, and these relationships came with their costs. Rayleigh fell into deep thought, then after a moment he nodded, and said with a smile, "I support rescuing Hachi. I will take you to Fishman Island, even for free." To be honest, he admired the king too much and simply didn't want to see him perish at the bottom of the sea. With the legendary Rayleigh accompanying him, Ezekiel will feel more at ease on the underwater journey. After all, Ezekiel is a user of devil fruit powers. The moment he encounters any issues in the water, he could face permanent peril, while Rayleigh is an absolutely formidable character capable of swimming across the sea. It's certainly wise to travel with him to Fishman Island. This is a straightforward collaboration. Rayleigh sees in Ezekiel the younger generation. In his eyes, this king will definitely achieve great things in the future. This man, who defies all the rules, is a constant feature in all the news on the mobile phone screen. On the way to the shipyard, Rayleigh slowly asked, "Are you planning to defeat Crocodile?" He noticed that all the headlines on the forum and in the news were accusing Crocodile and revealing nearly all of his past misdeeds, even pointing out that Crocodile used dance powder and attempted to destroy the River of Life project. "Mr. Rayleigh, he must be eliminated." He is too harmful to Alabasta. Ezekiel didn't hide anything. So why are you heading to Fishman Island now? Rayleigh pondered. It is possible that his main goal was to attract allies in the fight against Crocodile, which is why he asked to be taken to Fishman Island. What kind of operation is this? Rayleigh clarified that he was doing it for free and not as a favor. He was simply willing to offer him help, and he himself didn't mind going to Alabasta to help dispose of Crocodile. But Ezekiel just laughed and said nothing in response. They successfully borrowed a ship from an old friend of Rayleigh for the journey to the ocean floor. The vessel looked a bit worn, but Rayleigh promised there would be no issues with the ship. Then he coated it with a tar-like cover. The coating is actually mangrove resin. It can form a bubble-shaped sphere that wraps around the entire ship, allowing it to sail underwater. As the boat descended a bit, Ezekiel felt a hint of fear he had never experienced before. They were sinking from the world of light into the depths of the sea, feeling as if they were slowly descending into an abyss of hell. Rayleigh, looking at the mysterious boy king trying to maintain a composed expression, smiled. Ezekiel walked slowly along the edge of the deck. Around him was the unknown Black Sea, but in the end, he managed to suppress his fear and extended his hand through the membrane into the unknown danger. What are you doing? Rayleigh asked, puzzled. Ezekiel stared into the dark abyss. I feel fear. Fear. Rayleigh smiled. At that moment, Rayleigh's expression turned serious. He stared into the darkness and then shouted to Ezekiel, back. There's something in the sea. But Ezekiel didn't move back. He didn't even withdraw his hand, and a terrifying wave burst from his body. Even in these ocean depths, the waves began to surge layer by layer. A roar of fear echoed through the deep sea. With the faint light from the deck, Rayleigh and Ezekiel saw a terrifying figure almost 10 times larger than the ship. It was a massive sea king. Ezekiel pulled back his hand and turned his head to Rayleigh, who said, if you want to overcome fear, you can only become fear. In fact, the moment he extended his hand, he already sensed something approaching. But he did not expect that his conqueror's haki would make such a sea king retreat. Your Majesty, your conqueror's haki is extraordinary. Rayleigh looked thoughtfully at Ezekiel. Even the world government may not know about this. They still underestimated the King of Alabasta. Any being with conqueror's haki holds infinite potential. Can I bet on this man? For the first time, this thought crossed Rayleigh's mind. Place the future of this world in the hands of a man who is not a pirate. Alabasta is one of the member countries of the world government. It is part of this massive consortium that must be overthrown. It will not be the future of this world. The future of this world depends on the path charted by that guy, Roger. Rayleigh lit a cigarette and looked at Ezekiel with a tinge of regret. How could such a good man not be a pirate? Gurulu. A massive current surged, and the boat finally entered Fishman Island with the flow. The island's population is only 5 million people. It is home to all fishmen and mermaids. It has a reputation as an underwater paradise. Colorful corals have turned into homes. The sunlight tree Eve, located directly above Fishman Island, possesses a miraculous power that allows sunlight to pass through its roots, thus creating this underwater paradise. Who are you? The two people had just stepped ashore and were surrounded by a group of Fishman soldiers. Anyone arriving at Fishman Island must undergo identity verification. This does not mean that all pirates are arrested. After all, Fishman Island, which is a member of the world government, is also the territory of one of the 4 emperors, Whitebeard. But in any case, the true identity of the arrivals must be determined to prevent them from committing evil on Fishman Island or capturing fishmen as slaves. I'm from the Sabaudi archipelago, and he's just a tourist. Rayleigh smiled and offered a simple explanation, as he had quite a few friends among the boatmen here. Ezekiel paid no attention to Rayleigh's negotiations. He closed his eyes and sensed that within a 150-kilometer radius there were only a few dozen mobile phone users. Clearly, Princess Shirahoshi couldn't use a mobile phone because of her enormous size. In other words, the mobile phone was too small for her hands. Who are you? A soldier inquired of Ezekiel. He didn't believe that Ezekiel was just a tourist, as he looked quite mysterious. Ezekiel smiled and said, I am a member of the world government, King of Alabasta. Wiltsis Nefertari, king of 220 million people. Soldier, please inform the king of the Ryugu kingdom, the great King Neptune, that I have come to visit Fishman Island on behalf of Alabasta. Undoubtedly, this name immediately stunned the soldiers present. No matter how unaware they might be, everyone knew about Alabasta, a country with a population of 220 million. Meanwhile, Fishman Island has only 5 million residents. In front of them stood a very special person. The soldiers promptly reported the guest to the princes using the sound transmitting shell unique to Fishman Island. Rayleigh was a bit taken aback. He hadn't expected Ezekiel to be so open about his identity. Was he really here just to visit Fishman Island? In truth, Rayleigh was thinking like a pirate. After all, he was a pirate. A pirate is still a thief, no matter what. For him, it was unusual to loudly proclaim one's true identity and have the other side not panic but instead show respect. He had never experienced such a thing. Rayleigh watched the unfolding scene with admiration. A red carpet was rolled out for Ezekiel and Rayleigh. The Ryugu kingdom immediately extended the highest courtesy to the King of Alabasta. As for the possibility of deception, no one would believe it. After all, who would take such a huge risk to descend 10,000 meters underwater just to impersonate a human king? King Neptune of Fishman Island, wearing a crown and riding on a whale, slowly approached from the other end of the carpet, followed by his 3 sons, and behind them, a blue-skinned fishman, a whale shark. The Shishibukai Jinbi. Ezekiel smiled. He hadn't expected Jinbi to be on Fishman Island. Ezekiel, Your Majesty. Welcome to Fishman Island. The moment King Neptune saw Ezekiel, he was certain that this was indeed the king. The mobile phone he invented directly resolved the issue of the Ryugu kingdom getting delayed information from the outside world, given it was at the depth of 10,000 meters at the bottom of the sea. Although Neptune himself couldn't read the news due to the size of the mobile phone, he was still well informed about Ezekiel, who had invented it. As for Ezekiel's arrival, the entire royal family welcomed him because the diligent Alabasta and its kind king, known to them through mobile phone headlines, are worthy of Fishman Island. And Ezekiel should not face any danger here. If a king ruling over more than 220 million people were to die on Fishman Island, the outcome would be terrifying, frightening even to consider. King Neptune, I have heard much about Queen Otoheim, and have long dreamed of visiting Fishman Island. So I decided to visit you. If you don't mind, Ezekiel said with a smile. At the mention of the late queen, everyone's expressions turned noticeably somber. Ezekiel was then led to the palace. Your Majesty, I truly do not know what has attracted you to visit Fishman Island at this time. Neptune did not believe that Ezekiel was here just for a visit. Ezekiel paused, then looked at Jinbi and said, In fact, I need to address 2 matters. Please, go ahead, said Neptune. Firstly, I have a close partner. Her hometown is in Kokoyasi village in the East Blue. A group of fishermen has long enslaved the local people there. Their leader's name is Arlong. As Ezekiel spoke, everyone's expressions gradually became serious. Hearing what Arlong did to Kokoyasi village and a dozen other villages, Jinbi silently frowned. He was pleased to hear that Ezekiel and his subordinates saved Kokoyasi village and captured Arlong's crew. The entire hall fell silent. Rayleigh even set down the tea he was drinking. His body was tense, ready to act at a moment's notice. To be frank, it was hard to trust the fishmen to behave rationally in this situation. Even if it was Arlong's fault, he was still a fishman and a member of the Sun Pirates. He was part of the same crew as Jinbi. Jinbi stood before Ezekiel. Jinbi, what are you doing? Neptune was afraid he might do something undesirable and wanted to stop it immediately. Ezekiel looked at Jinbi calmly, without the slightest change in his expression. To everyone's surprise, Jinbi kneeled before Ezekiel, closed his eyes, and touched his head to the ground. Your Majesty, I apologize for everything Arlong did to your friends. I sent him off to the East Blue. I didn't know he was capable of such things. It's partly my fault and my responsibility, and I will never deny that. Arlong's arrest is not your fault, it's just that I didn't guide him on the right path. By the end, Jinbi's eyes were already full of tears. He recalled various moments of interacting with Arlong in the past. That fishman, with his views, couldn't teach the fishman anything good. He simply hated humans. When Tiger died, he wanted to attack a marine ship. Ezekiel sighed, understanding Jinbi and even the reason why Arlong's pirates sought revenge against humans. They decided to set aside this issue. On Fishman Island, there were already mobile phones, and Neptune requested an increase in the size of the mobile phones. Thus Ezekiel utilized the powers of the devil fruit to create tablet-sized phones, offered as an exclusive deal for Fishman Island. And when he supplied the first batch of mobile phones for Fishman Island, Ezekiel already knew that the East Blue market had officially started selling mobile phones. Sales of his mobile phones could soar by millions in just a day, and this pace was accelerating rapidly, and it wouldn't be long before his mobile phone updated. Only on the second day of waiting in the palace, Ezekiel finally noticed a bright spot on the user map, more dazzling than an admiral. Shirahoshi. Poseidon's power 400 GB. Ezekiel let out a long sigh of relief. In any case, just as he got, this power could indeed be uploaded. After obtaining the power of Poseidon, one of the three ancient weapons, he might indeed be able to compete with the world government face to face. Arresting this man would mean provoking the world government. They could exclude Alabasta from its ranks. But that's not the main issue. The real problem is that the world government and the Marine Patrol are likely to send troops against Alabasta. That doesn't matter. Ezekiel looked at the progress indicator, which showed less than 100 gigabytes. It seems you are ready for everything, so what do you ultimately plan to do? Neptune said with a sigh of relief after hearing Ezekiel's words. This time we need to completely erase Crocodile from the territory of Alabasta. Ezekiel checked the news on his phone. Crocodile's capture had just succeeded, and a large number of Baroque Works members were still under siege. If you cannot hold Alabasta, you might have to head to sea, Rayleigh sighed. He remembered that the young king had a younger sister who might be able to return and become the queen of Alabasta. Exchanging the throne for a Shishibukai who harms the kingdom might not be the worst option, but without this king Alabasta wouldn't be the same. Rayleigh also got that perhaps it wasn't so bad. This sea also needed such a king. Jinbi and the others suddenly came to their senses, thinking that Ezekiel might already have a plan to go to sea, but how could he be away from Alabasta at this time? Go to sea. Ezekiel smiled. In this life, it's impossible to go to sea and not become a pirate. Moreover, you can't be a king of a country and a thief simultaneously. Rayleigh, you once said that you owe me. Is that still valid? Ezekiel asked. Of course, Rayleigh, who always kept his promises, replied. Then tomorrow morning, we shall go to Alabasta together. After saying this, Ezekiel returned to his room and didn't come out again. Rayleigh and the others looked at each other, strongly sensing that things weren't as simple as they seemed, but they didn't know what the king was planning. Thus overnight news spread across the seas that Alabasta had arrested the Shishibukai, Crocodile. This news was everywhere, not just on mobile phones but also in newspapers. However, since the newspapers were under the control of the world government, the information was somewhat biased. For example, they accused Alabasta of arresting Crocodile without reason and so on. The power of Poseidon. Loading completed successfully. Upon hearing this message, Ezekiel immediately felt a strange power within his body. His observation haki and this power naturally blended together, and he sensed a kind of arbitrary control arising within him. He realized that within the range of his observation haki, he could command any sea kings at will. No wonder Shirahoshi's control over the sea kings wasn't strong. It seems one must see, hear, and feel the power of Poseidon to truly harness the strength of the ancient weapon. Rayleigh and Ezekiel waited for their coated ship. Neptune was supposed to say goodbye to Ezekiel. Jinbi, who was scrolling through a large mobile phone, suddenly shook all over and exclaimed incredulously. How is this possible? Are they insane? Rayleigh suspiciously looked up and saw a news headline displayed on the phone, which was almost as large as a tablet. Alabasta to publicly execute Shishibukai Crocodile at the Royal Fleet Headquarters in a room in 3 days. A public execution of Crocodile. This is madness. Even if the world government and Marine Patrol did not want to act before now, they must take action. Could it be that the world government is planning a massive battle with Alabasta in a room? At this moment, a coated boat finally appeared before them. Your Majesty. Rayleigh was at a loss for words for a while. Are you confused? Asked Rayleigh. Ezekiel looked at him with some excitement. Is it not fear, but madness? Rayleigh was shocked. How will we get there? By boat, it must be too late already, Rayleigh continued. Will snapped his fingers, and thanks to the observation hacky, the sound of the snap traveled over hundreds of kilometers, creating waves in the quiet ocean depths. Everyone stood in confusion. Roar. It was as if a growl from ancient times from the deepest part of the sea, from a dark cave untouched by sunlight for billions of years, rose up as a terrifying monster. More than a dozen massive sea kings, each 10,000 meters long, were swaying their bodies beyond the boundaries of Fishman Island. Fishman Island was the size of their heads, which slowly rose above the edge of the island. Such a scene was hard to imagine, with pairs of black giant eyes staring at them. Rayleigh's breath halted for a moment. What terror! These aren't just kings of the sea, they are the mighty sea kings. A force akin to sight and sound spreads through the air like circles of dense sound waves. Rayleigh's pupils narrowed. They were speaking. Answering the call. Under the astonished gaze of Neptune and the others, Ezekiel slowly raised his hand, and these creatures, larger than Fishman Island, immediately lowered their heads and obeyed. Ezekiel turned, looked at the stunned Rayleigh, and said, Rayleigh, regardless of whether I have the right, let's say no to the world government. With Poseidon's power, Ezekiel now realized he commanded a dozen supermassive sea kings capable of destroying islands. Come on, world government, I await you in 3 days. Alabasta, Iruma. In a dark chamber, Crocodile was shackled with sea stone chains. Nearby, many members of Baroque works were also imprisoned. They could never have imagined such a turn of events, but in less than 3 days, the seemingly mighty Baroque Works organization simply fell apart, and even their leader was captured. And it was the royal fleet that arrested them, not the world government's marine patrol. Boss, is there any chance? Asked Des Bones, also known as Mr. One, as he sat on the ground, calmly looking at a rather miserable crocodile. Crocodile slowly lifted his head. The world government definitely won't stand idly by. We just need to wait for the world government's response. He recalled the days when the world government had approached him for cooperation. Could Ezekiel Nefertari, even with the support of Zephyr and Fujitara, combine all of Alabasta's power to contend with the world government? It's not a force you can challenge after becoming king for less than a year. He's truly out of his depth. Soon, he will learn who the real master of these seas is. If he can't find Pluton, the destruction of Alabasta is imminent. But Ezekiel could never even dream of finding Pluton. Yet, he found Poseidon. At that moment, the calm sea suddenly surged with a monstrous wave as an unprecedented, terrifying beast appeared, slowly opened its enormous maw, and released a ship that seemed tiny in comparison. Rayleigh still hadn't recovered from the shock. He looked at Will, who could freely control the Sea Kings. He felt as if his entire worldview had been shattered. Such power, in his opinion, could only exist in fairy tales. But Ezekiel truly possesses one of the 3 types of ancient weapons, Poseidon. It is said that each of the 3 ancient weapons has the capacity to destroy the world. In the world of One Piece, this is equivalent to the level of nuclear deterrence on Earth. That's why Ezekiel dares to challenge the world government. Just as the world government urgently needs a way to remove Alabasta, Ezekiel also needs an opportunity to show them his strength and strive for peaceful and stable development. And this time is critically short. Iruma will become the arena for a great battle. This battle is bound to thunder. It's a war that both the world government and Alabasta need. This war itself is a means of achieving a political goal. Without this goal, the war would become unnecessary. How massive are the supergiant sea kings? The largest body is over 5 kilometers long. What does this mean? Fishman Island is only 10,000 meters below the sea's surface, which means these monsters can easily reach Fishman Island. These are not the small sea kings that can be encountered randomly, but super sea kings. It would not be an exaggeration to say that any of these sea kings possesses destructive power and threat at an admiral level. But these guys also have a fatal flaw. No matter how strong they are, they remain sea creatures and cannot come ashore at all. In less than 2 days, the Super Sea Kings delivered Ezekiel and Rayleigh back to Alabasta. At this time, the world government finally spoke out. Alabasta attacked the Shichibukai, trying to provoke the world government. Destroying the Shichibukai system is akin to provoking the Marine Patrol and the world government. Canceling Alabasta's national representation in the world government, Alabasta will no longer be protected by the world government and the Marine Patrol. On the day of the execution, the Marine Patrol and the world government will send patrol troops to rescue Crocodile and impose sanctions on the Mad King of Alabasta, Ezekiel Nefertari. Reading the headlines, Ezekiel smiled silently. The world government didn't even issue a demand for Crocodile's release within a set time frame, but instead immediately took the opportunity to impose sanctions on him. This shows how much the world government wants to get rid of him. Your Majesty, is this war inevitable? Is there any chance of reconciliation with the world government? Rayleigh asked. He didn't like wars because any war means death. Mr. Rayleigh, Ezekiel said with a dangerous smile, looking at the port of Irum which was now before them. This time it's not the world government waging war on Alabasta, but Alabasta's first challenge to the world government. Reconciliation is impossible. Without a fight, no one will know how powerful this country has become. Nevertheless, Ezekiel still scheduled the public execution in 3 days. Of course, he trusted in the power of Poseidon, but he did not want to give the world government too much time to prepare. Modern young people are indeed more dangerous, Rayleigh sighed. However, for some inexplicable reason, he felt compelled to help the king. Let's consider the possible outcomes of this war. If it truly succeeds, it might be the first time in 800 years that the world government is put in its place. Can they win? It mainly depends on the strength that the world government and the Marine Patrol will deploy. If it's like the War of the Best in the original work, with 3 admirals, plus Sengoku Garp, and a bunch of vice admirals and rear admirals, and Ezekiel plans to face them alone. Let's leave aside the power of Poseidon. Fujitora and Rayleigh are capable of blocking the 3 admirals, that's certainly not a problem for them. Smoker and Tashigi can definitely handle the elite vice admirals. And if we return to the power of Poseidon, it's unlikely that Garp and Sengoku could withstand that. The world government is a force capable of dealing with Whitebeard. But Ezekiel is not a pirate, he's the king of a country, and not just any country. He's the descendant of the 20 kings. Of course, this is an important advantage. And therefore, the world government cannot deploy its full might to deal with him. The port of Irum was gradually approaching. Standing at the bow of the ship, Rayleigh peered ahead and saw only a dozen large ships lined up in 2 rows. The crimson flag of Alabasta was raised, the national music and horn sounded, and Zephyr and Fujitora stood on the shore. They were welcoming their king. When Ezekiel disembarked from the ship, Fujitora and Zephyr knelt down, and then thousands of soldiers followed suit, all kneeling together. Unlike the white uniform of the Marine Patrol, the Alabasta fleet's uniform was black. Given the patrol's reputation, the contrast between black and white should stand out. Rayleigh couldn't help but feel awe at the authority Ezekiel commanded on this land. And these people, who had just joined the royal fleet, were treated with the same respect as him. With honor. Violation of protocol. Zephyr said through gritted teeth, and Fujitora felt ashamed as well. Some had not knelt to greet the king, and they now felt awkward. Fujitora was aware of Ezekiel's departure from Alabasta. After all, Fujitora was Ezekiel's guard. However, Nami did not know. Only now did she learn that the king had been preparing for the upcoming war, and had even gone with some purpose to Fishman Island, 10,000 meters deep in the sea. Although she still couldn't grasp Ezekiel's true intentions, anyone could understand that it had to be linked to the forthcoming war. Nami angrily walked out with her hands on her hips and looked at Ezekiel, her eyes slightly moist, unable to tell if she was happy or angry. Foolish king, please don't run off again without warning. Ezekiel's face softened, and he only said one word. Okay. But in his soul, he had a goal. He could not be defeated. Not just for himself, but for the people who are ready to follow him, risking their lives, the people who believe in him. He must not betray their trust. The constant sacrifices caused by the cowardice and incompetence of the former king, which almost led to the country's demise and the collapse of faith, were simply terrible and unimaginable. Now they move forward together because of a shared belief, and they must follow this belief from start to end. Zephyr recognized Rayleigh, they were old acquaintances, and now the two are no longer at odds. Since Rayleigh is wanted by the Marine Patrol of the world government, what does that have to do with the Royal Fleet? In Ezekiel's standards, not everyone who claims to be a pirate should be declared wanted. A crime pertaining to public disorder must be committed. Only those who have committed evil acts, violating the law, can be deemed as wanted criminals. According to this standard, like the later Luffy and his ilk, are they truly pirates? More accurately, they are pirate hunters. With decency and lawfulness, they never trouble people, love performing good deeds, and fight the Shichibukai and the Four Emperors. Are you calling them pirates? They are marine operatives under the guise of pirates. Admirals of the Marine Patrol aren't as effective as they are in tackling pirates. This concept has also to some extent spread across forums and newspaper headlines. According to this definition, in fact, many pirates are not pirates at all. Thus there are currently 2 lists of wanted individuals on the ocean, but the Royal Fleet's list is electronic and updates are only reported in news phone headlines. At this moment, nearly all of Alabasta's combat power is concentrated in a room, and the eyes of the world are focused here as well. After all, countless reporters risked their lives to rush here within 3 days. Moreover, there is no longer a concern about the eternal pose of Alabasta, making people's movement significantly easier. In the middle of the distant sea, an airship halted in mid-air. You idiot. I need to get to a room in 3 days. If you don't get me there, Alabasta won't have a press director. A man resembling an albatross, dressed in an elegant suit, angrily yelled at Smoker. He was Big News Morgan's. Initially, he wasn't very interested in Smoker's proposal, but after a call from Ezekiel, and after listening to Ezekiel's incredible ideas on journalism, Morgan's was tempted. In particular, Ezekiel promised to open all rights to the mobile news app for him, not just for showing pre-recorded pieces, but for live news broadcasts in real time which can be seen by 50 million mobile phone users. For Morgan's, wealth and power aren't the most important things. The most important thing is the pursuit of news coverage. He craves big news and burns with the desire to announce to the world all the major events that have occurred in this world. Thus he lives up to his name, Big News. His Majesty already spoke to me on the phone. He said it's too dangerous to travel by airship in bad weather at sea, so let's reach the destination by other methods. Smoker calmly took a drag on his cigar and exhaled smoke. Wait again. I've already been waiting for almost 3 hours. Morgan's was furious, as 3 hours were enough for their airship to cover hundreds of kilometers. What method could be faster than the speed of an airship? But, of course, there is one. As soon as Morgan's uttered these words, a deep howl suddenly echoed from the depths of the sea, resembling a call from another distant world, heralding its unknown mysteries, and the sea began to bubble as if boiling. Smoker's cigar fell to the deck, and he peered under the airship. What is that? Morgan's was also shocked but continued filming with the camera in his hand. As the sea current gradually surged, an incredible monster finally emerged from the depths. It resembled a whale but had terrifying teeth, dark eyes, and countless tentacles. Just one look at it gave people chills and made the hair on their head stand on end. What on earth is this? A sea king. Do such enormous sea kings exist? It's the legendary ancient sea king. Morgan's had deeper knowledge. Do Ezekiel called Smoker, and looking at the sea monster that resembled an evil god, he answered the call with trepidation. Smoker-san, I've sent a messenger. Have you encountered it? Your Majesty, let me confirm. Smoker's eyelids blinked wildly, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. Are you talking about the Sea King? Under normal circumstances, people refer to huge sea creatures as sea beasts, larger ones as sea kings, and there's a more terrifying type usually called ancient sea kings. Roar. A long drawn-out roar, unlike anything from this world, pierced everything around. Oh. It seems you've already encountered it. Ezekiel's laughter came from the other end of the line. At this moment, the shocked Morgans and Smoker saw the terrifying monster extend a massive tentacle, holding on to a massive Alabasta flag. At the same time, a steel cabin resembling a submarine rolled out from the countless tentacles of the gigantic creature. So this is Alabasta's decisive way to challenge the world government. Morgans was still shouting, so excited he couldn't contain himself, and continued taking photographs. Descendant of the 20 kings. Descendant of the Nefertari family. Ezekiel Nefertari, what do you call yourself? God of the seas. Manipulator of the sea kings. Master of evil gods. From personal intuition, he already knew this was the power of Ezekiel. In this era when control over the sea means control over the kingdom, what does it mean to have the ability to manipulate the sea kings? Smoker, remember. Never underestimate the sea. Even the golden lion Shiki was so overconfident that he couldn't compete with a natural storm. Smoker still recalls how Zephyr spoke insightfully about the terror of the sea. But what did he witness today? Didn't Zephyr say that no one can ignore the sea? Teacher Zephyr, have you seen such a scene? Don't say yes, because no one has ever even heard of such a thing. Zephyr didn't lie to him. It is true that no one can ignore the sea, but there are beings that can be unprincipled in the sea, those are the sea kings. And there is a great power that can control the sea kings. It sends shivers down the spine. Now the fears concerning the war between Alabasta, the world government, and the Marines have been dispelled in an instant. Come, and try if you have the courage. But Ezekiel's methods are something more. Thousands of Marines and a large number of the strong in this world are part of the current royal fleet of Alabasta, and they have been enhanced thanks to his downloading. Even simple fruit abilities have been improved by at least tenfold. He needs only 20 gigabytes of memory to create combat power capable of at least matching the strength of a vice admiral of the Marine Guard. Although there might be a lack of combat experience, this issue is solvable. It only requires delaying the opponent for a moment. For example, Kuro can easily kill in a matter of seconds by trapping the opponent in stone for a while. And against ordinary Marines, such power is more than dangerous. If it leads to sufficient losses, the next time the Marines and the world government want to deal with Alabasta, they'll think many times over. Upon arriving in Irumu, Smoker immediately led Morgans to Ezekiel. His Majesty is already expecting you, a soldier reported. This period was completely special, so Ezekiel lived directly in the office of Irumu, and shared a workspace with Marshal Zephyr. All of Alabasta was forced to adopt a state of martial law. But in reality, the impact on the civilian population was relatively minor. Thanks to propaganda on the mobile phone forum, all of Alabasta was filled with enthusiasm and even harbored a tremendous sense of hatred toward the world government. In almost every city one could hear about support for Ezekiel's counterattack against the assault from the world government and the Marine Guard. The people were convinced that such persecution by the world government was unjust evil, and aggression against the entire nation of Alabasta. Even wealthy citizens began donating to the treasury, and the number of people deciding to join Alabasta's army was growing. It could be said that a voluntary national mobilization was underway. From the highest point of the Royal Fleet headquarters of Alabasta, Morgans had a good view of Irumu's territory and the adjoining sea, with several enormous giants slowly rising from the depths. The weather here was as stable as the Grand Line during a harsh sandstorm, but it didn't worry the giants in the slightest. A giant, carrying countless tons of materials on its back, was approaching Irumu step by step. What is that? Morgans asked. It's a person with devil fruit abilities, Smoker gave a concise explanation. I understand that, but the question is, how can there be so many of them? Morgans felt that his worldview was constantly being updated since he first stepped foot in Alabasta. There were Marine declaring justice, but they were dressed in black military uniforms. With the help of mobile phones, people here could exchange information unprecedentedly fast. And almost everyone could communicate in real time. It was his dream news distribution platform. The powers of the devil fruit here seemed almost limitless, and many of the fruits appeared similar, but people used them not for battles but for construction. Have you ever seen a person with the power of a Marine Vice Admiral lift a large stone to build a house? Have you ever seen a person with the power of a Marine Guard Admiral use fruit ability to carry heavy objects? These super strong people use all their might not for fighting, but for accomplishing useful work. This is Alabasta's understanding of the devil fruit. His Majesty Ezekiel says that these powers should not be used to fight and wage wars, Smoker explained. Isn't this too wasteful? It's a waste of time, certainly. Morgans wanted to argue, but looking at the massive naval headquarters, which was miraculously completed in less than a month, he didn't know where to start. Smoker stopped in front of the office door, then carefully took out a cigar, extinguished it, and put it back in his pocket. He then looked at the Birdman with some disdain and said, "Destroying the world is very easy. There are many forces at sea that can destroy the world, but only King Ezekiel can restore peace." The door slowly opened and Morgans, still pondering Smoker's words, saw Ezekiel. Despite the king's youth, Morgans had to admit that he was unlike any king he had ever seen. This is what a true king should be. The man who is confident enough, a person who dares to challenge the world, a god who can manipulate sea kings. That's why the people of Alabasta follow this king with all their heart and soul. The people of Alabasta are truly happy. "Your Majesty, Morgans pays you his respects," he said, bowing casually and displaying the utmost respect. Such courtesy he had never even shown on the birthdays of any of the 4 emperors. "Finally, you're here." When Ezekiel saw Morgans, he realized that he would definitely give up his newspaper now. With Morgan's help, he had for the first time the chance to voice his opinions not only through mobile phones but also beyond Alabasta. They chatted freely for about an hour and Ezekiel told him in detail about the paths of development, as well as the power and prospects of the media. Morgans was shocked and said nothing. The king truly impressed him, making him want not only to serve as the director of the information department but also to attract more figures, all the resources of the news industry. Ezekiel immediately launched the Ocean TV app and gave Morgans all permissions to work with this application. The World War in Urum will be broadcasted worldwide. Perhaps due to confidence in their own strength, the world government actually chose the same approach. Both sides want to use each other to gain fame. But the world government's live broadcast is much more complicated than through Will's mobile phone and requires the use of Den Mushi. This required a great effort from the world government. Finally, the appointed third day arrived, and the eyes of the entire world were fixed on Urum. Hundreds of military ships of the world government's Marine Guard majestically lined up at Urum's port, blocking all access to the sea. As for the royal fleet, at the highest point of the naval headquarters stood Ezekiel himself, Fleet Marshal Zephyr and Fujitara. The war is about to begin. Ocean TV will start a live broadcast that will continue throughout all events. Follow the Ocean TV live broadcast and experience the brutality of war. The greatest battle in 800 years is about to erupt today. The forum exploded, as if the entire world was discussing this war. Even the fact that Kato had once again invaded Whitebeard's territory was overshadowed. The number of visits to the Ocean TV app reached historical heights, and big news Morgans appeared live on television even before the war started. It's clear the atmosphere here in Urum is already very tense. According to live reports, Marine patrol warships are stationed less than a kilometer from the port. There are hundreds of warships present, and the scale far exceeds a buster call. Morgan switched the screen during his talk. People in front of mobile televisions could also feel the atmosphere of war. When they saw the Marine patrol ships appearing on the calm blue sea, even those who favored Alabasta couldn't help but waver. You can see the headquarters of the Marine fleet in Alabasta. His Majesty the King of Alabasta is here in person. Next to him are the Zephyr unit, and the blind samurai Isha, who is the commander of the guard. Morgans did not pretend he wasn't shocked himself. When the image turned, people saw an elite fleet soldier standing on the high platform of the headquarters, an old man wearing round glasses with long white hair, a scar over his eye, and a sword hanging from his waist. As soon as Morgan said his name, the world was in an uproar. "It's the legendary pirate, the right hand of the pirate king, Silvers Rayleigh," squealed Morgans. The Marines had long known the whereabouts of this man, but since Rayleigh had retired long ago and lived peacefully for decades, they didn't want to waste time dealing with him. However, Sengoku did not expect he would dare to support Alabasta in such a grand manner. "This is perfect," the Vice Admiral calmly took a sip of tea. "It gives us a reasonable justification." Sengoku agreed with him. In this case at least, the accusation against Alabasta for conspiring with pirates has compelling evidence. Since the other side chose to cooperate with Rayleigh, they have a reason to truly punish Alabasta. The newspapers aligned with the world government soon focused on the information about Rayleigh's appearance, harshly condemning Alabasta's dealings with pirates. They decisively denounced the king's criminality, demanding that the king immediately resign, and that the Marines enter Alabasta to liberate the oppressed people of the country. Taoxiao News quickly counterattacked. Morgan suddenly received a personal message from Ezekiel during the live broadcast. Understood. Morgans took a glance and explained to 50 million viewers in front of their phones. Rayleigh, instead of heading to a room, Admiral Sengoku of the Marine Fleet was stationed at the Marine headquarters, monitoring the progression of the war. When he saw Rayleigh's figure, he angrily slammed the table. Our King of Alabasta wants to declare war on the world government before the peoples of the entire world. Soon as the image changed, Ezekiel appeared before everyone sitting on the throne. This was the new King of Alabasta, who was truly addressing the public for the first time in his life. Is this the new King of Alabasta? He seems to be just a 15 or 16-year-old boy who possesses such courage and bravery, it's astonishing. Much younger than he looks from afar. Is he really going to oppose the government? He doesn't seem like a mad king, so why has he pushed Alabasta into such a situation? In contrast to the confusion and doubt of people worldwide, the residents of Alabasta reacted very differently. Joyful cries rang out in all the cities. Ezekiel stared into the mobile phone camera lens. People watched online as his eyes gradually calmed, and Ezekiel began to speak slowly. Greetings to everyone in the world, I am the King of Alabasta, Ezekiel Nefertari. Currently, over 60 million people are watching everything happening here through mobile phones created by Alabasta. The eyes of more than hundreds of millions of people are following this through various channels, whether by sea or land, mountains or plains. The world has heard his voice. At present, the world government has not truly realized the threat posed by the authoritative regime that has taken hold of it. In this world, there has never been a shortage of oppressors and the oppressed. Power consumes people's hearts, power destroys willpower. People who are addicted to power and might ignore the truth of this world, a world made up of countless ordinary individuals. Today, Alabasta stands as an oppressed rebel, not as an ambitious ruler. We have not attacked anyone, we simply wanted to execute the pirate who committed crimes in Alabasta. I have noticed that some are focusing on the claim that Alabasta has conspired with the legendary pirate Rayleigh. Before I explain this, please listen to me first. Currently, a scaffold has been set up for the execution of Crocodile. He has been held accountable as a criminal, with his various crimes being described on the forum and broadcast live. Crocodile used dance powder in Alabasta for many years, leading to the mass death of civilians, destruction of the water channel, the downfall of cities, conflicts between the people and the royal family, and the uprising of hundreds of thousands of people. Those unaware of all this were shocked by Crocodile's crimes, while those who knew were filled with righteous indignation. This man was encouraged by the world government for nearly 10 years. They gave him Shishibukai status, and even sent the Marine Patrol to save him. Can we, the people of Alabasta, agree with this? Ezekiel raised his hands, and all the soldiers of the Alabasta army and fleet below immediately shouted, "No. We will never agree." In the darkness, swords and gun barrels were raised, and the sound carried for 10 miles, with their spirit soaring to the sky. Then Ezekiel's voice sounded again. Why are we cooperating with Rayleigh? Let me ask you this. Compared to Crocodile, recognized by the Marines and the world government, Rayleigh has a louder reputation, but has he done anything to innocent people in this world? What has he been pursued for? I examined Rayleigh's past and concluded that, in my opinion, his biggest crime was resisting the world government. At the moment when no one had yet reacted, Ezekiel continued speaking. Thus, the law of Alabasta does not recognize him as a pirate. In this country, we have our own rules, our own perceptions, and our own judgments regarding pirate standards. The 50 million strong audience was stunned. Rayleigh himself was shocked. He hadn't expected Ezekiel to speak about him now. As a pirate, he never killed an innocent person, and even helped countless civilians because he was with Roger's crew. Venturing out to sea with dreams and witnessing the oppression of people by the world government, he helped those people, and thus he was considered a pirate. But today, this king declared in front of hundreds of millions of people worldwide that he, Rayleigh, was not a pirate. He, the right hand of the pirate king, not a pirate. What kind of tricks are these? Utterly absurd. The 5 elders, who were coldly watching this scene, angrily stated. Those who break the rules disrupt the peace. Peacebreakers are a threat. A threat is evil. No one has truly risen against the world government for 800 years. Roger couldn't, the 4 emperors can't, and he won't be able to either. Ezekiel Nefertari. Several people gritted their teeth and uttered his name, wishing to immediately remove him from the throne and then drown him in the sea. But Isso and Zephyr were smiling. All the hesitations and doubts they constantly felt in their hearts were answered by Ezekiel's explanation. Zephyr spread justice across the sea, but his family was killed by pirates. So, was he wrong about the pirates? It turns out the world isn't so simple. For the first time, Ezekiel posed such a shocking question to the world. Who is the real pirate? It's a serious question. Almost everyone was engrossed in contemplating Ezekiel's words, especially those who are currently at sea, either aiming for fame or forced to venture into the sea. Are they really pirates? Regardless of how the world government enforces justice, innocent people, as defined by the Law of Alabasta, will always be considered innocent here. The term Law of Alabasta became popular on the forum, and countless people were asking what exactly the Law of Alabasta means by piracy. The Great Book of Alabasta's laws was uploaded to the forum, and for a time people studied and evaluated it. Rayleigh's life made headlines both in the news and on the forum, and one question was raised everywhere. So, Rayleigh isn't a pirate. It turns out Rayleigh is such an amazing person. Why don't the news stories I saw in the past look like these? How much has the world government been hiding? I've spent more than 40 years at sea, and now someone tells me I'm not a pirate. A free man. The so-called right hand of the pirate king, the legendary pirate Rayleigh, turned out to be a wanted criminal just because he opposed the world government and the cruelty of the world nobility. This is ridiculous justice. Edward Newgate, Whitebeard, was drinking wine when Marco said to him with a smile, "Pops, this person says you're not a pirate." According to the Law of Alabasta, Whitebeard himself is not considered a pirate, but many people from Whitebeard's crew are wanted. PFFD. Whitebeard set down his mug, staring intently at Ezekiel in the picture, but even after some time, he didn't say another word. Marine Headquarters, Marineford. He can't be allowed to continue. Sengoku shouted into the phone, slamming the table as he watched the live broadcast. Unexpectedly for him, Ezekiel showed such courage and determination. At this moment of universal attention, just a few words made the outside world revisit all the shortcomings of the pirate era and even direct all the spears at the world government and Marines. It's madness. But Sengoku knew that what Ezekiel said was not completely wrong, otherwise he wouldn't have tolerated Rayleigh for so many years. And it's not just about Rayleigh. Too many pirates go to sea just to pursue their dreams. In fact, they don't commit any crimes at all. For example, there is a pirate like the Golden Lion, who can be considered a pirate in the true sense of the word. Of course, it was too late to support Ezekiel's words. Boom. The sound of a cannon shot shook the port of Irum. The massive harbor was shattered by a pitch-black artillery shell. A huge military ship of the Marine Patrol slowly entered the harbor, followed by dozens of warships lined up. Countless reporters frantically filmed the military ship. The camera function on mobile phones also highlighted its crucial role at this time. All media cameras switched on, and people watching the live broadcast could finally see everything clearly. The Marine Patrol is attacking Irum. On the deck of the enormous military ship stood 3 people dressed in white justice cloaks. The audience felt a thrill as the cameras panned towards them. These are all 3 admirals of the Marine Patrol. The entire audience was shocked. Instead of one admiral as they had imagined, all 3 admirals appeared. Even considering the 4 emperors, there had never been a pirate who could gather all 3 admirals against them. This trio is known as the highest combat power of the Marines. Is there any chance for Alabasta to survive against such a level of power? It seems unrealistic. Morgan squinted as he noticed several pirate ships hidden behind the Marine Patrol's warships. It's the warlords. There was Doflamingo, whom Ezekiel had previously arrested, as well as a swordsman with a black sword on his back, the warlord Hawkeye, the strongest swordsman in the world. 2 warlords, and 3 admirals of the Marine Patrol. More than a dozen vice admirals and rear admirals of the Marine Patrol. Such a lineup is considered enough to defeat the 4 emperors. But even seeing this situation, Ezekiel simply stood resolutely and waved his hand. There's no need to say more. For Alabasta. An astounding response echoed, creating an unprecedented grandeur. Boom. Following the soldiers will Ezekiel unleash the power of the King the Conqueror's Haki, directing it at the Marines. It took time to call upon the thousands of Marines members of the world government. This is the will of a king, exclaimed Morgans. Blue veins appeared on Doflamaho's forehead and he too released his Conqueror's Haki without hesitation. The clash of Conqueror's Haki formed a circle of terrifying black waves that slowly dissipated into the air. In the next moment, Rokiji jumped up and shouted in a deep voice. Ice Age. A terrifying glacier began to freeze the sea beneath the marine warships, which were positioned closer to the port. An enormous ice platform formed. The Marines immediately jumped off their ships onto the ice and rushed towards Alabasta. Kill them. The royal soldiers showed no fear either, and they dashed into battle with the Marines who had once been their comrades. From the moment they left the Marine Patrol under the world government, they were prepared for this day. It's monstrous, it's terrible, Master Zephyr. Kazuru immediately found someone he had long been acquainted with. The two collided, but this Zephyr was stronger than the earlier Zephyr, although Kazuru's speed was higher. Seeing Zephyr transformed into the right hand of Ezekiel Nefertari, Rokiji expressed his surprise. Even though he had received this information earlier, he was still shocked when witnessing this scene himself. Master Zephyr, what are you doing? Clang. At this moment, Iso's sword was unsheathed. Alabasta had joined the battle. Ezekiel said little about military strategy. There is only one rule: find yourself an opponent, and then defeat them. Now with Kazuru keeping an eye on Zephyr, Iso headed toward Rokiji. Rayleigh just shrugged, jumped up and struck at Akainu, who had already transformed into magma. Do you really want to wear out the old man? Leave this toughest mad dog to me. Zephyr, Iso, does my past as a pirate not concern you? In any case, I'm on your side now. The main thing isn't that Akainu is stronger, it's that this guy is truly a desperate king. And I'll fight for him. The 3 admirals have been assigned. Morgans was explaining wildly on television, which was broadcasting such a grand war for the first time, and the viewers were captivated as well. Even powerful figures like the 4 emperors dropped everything and watched the battle. Ma. Charlotte Linlin laughed, watching the battlefield through her mobile phone. A child can keep 3 admirals at bay. The sea has come alive again. I must throw a tea party. Deifuku, can you bring that man here? Who are you talking about, Mom? Asked the tall Deifuku to Big Mom. This guy, their leader, Charlotte Linlin laughed. I admire him. I want to marry off my daughter to him. I'm afraid that won't work, Mom. Deifuku was embarrassed. He was such a person that not even the 4 emperors wanted to provoke him. Regardless of the outcome of this war, Ezekiel is destined to become a famous man. Countless people are waving flags in his honor. Although there are many strong individuals in this world, he is the one who dares to confront the world government. Why? Charlotte Linlin was slightly annoyed. Mom, it's better to wait until this war is over. At this time on the battlefield, Doflamaho's gaze was fixed on Ezekiel with a dangerous smile. Although he had suffered defeat, he was by no means a man who surrendered easily, especially since this time he had an ally, so he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He was simply waiting calmly for Hawkeye next to him to make the first strike. This man is known as the strongest swordsman in the world, and his strength is no less than that of an admiral. With such an ally, the king would be unable to resist them. Once they overpower this king, the war will end. But Hawkeye had yet to make a move, and a young girl appeared before him. She arrived before the royal soldiers, who were still waiting in a room. She wore a dark fleet counter-admiral uniform and held a decent blade in her hand. And Hawkeye felt that this was undoubtedly a worthy opponent. Your name, woman. Hawkeye intended to make an exception and fight against a woman. Tashigi slowly drew Shihir with the resolve that only a swordsman could possess. It seemed she had been waiting for this day since she was born, as a swordswoman. Even though she had the power granted by His Majesty the King, Tashigi knew that it should be impossible for her to defeat Hawkeye, who attained his current strength after countless trials. "My name is Tashigi." The girl charged forward, and she here collided with Kakuto Yoru. Clang. "You idiot." Doflamingo shouted angrily, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't force Hawkeye to abandon the opponent in front of him and deal with him instead. At this moment, a cloud of smoke drifted nearby, from which a hand emerged and fiercely struck him in the face. Boom. An invisible silk thread around Doflamingo blocked the blow. "Do you want to die, scum?" Seeing Smoker emerge from the smoke, Doflamingo gave him a cold glance. He didn't take even the strongest users of Logia Devil Fruit power seriously. 5 colored threads. A silk thread, covered with armament haki, caught the smoke. The smoke itself was particles transformed from Smoker's body. Caught by haki, he was inevitably injured. At that moment, a golden light illuminated the smoke, and the emitted light wave penetrated right into Daffy's hand. Doflamingo's pupils suddenly narrowed. Kazuru's ability. Why? Confused, Daffy was now in shock. What scared him even more was that this scum possessed the dual power of the Devil Fruit. Another Devil Fruit power. All of this must be related to Ezekiel. 2 Logia abilities. Morgans was astounded. Though he knew that Ezekiel had 10 men with the ability of Ishi Ishi no Mi, the light fruit is not an ordinary fruit, but a devil fruit belonging to Kazuru, one of the 3 admirals of the Marines. For more fanfictions and 60+ chapters in advance, follow me on Patreon. The link is in the description below.